What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another Angle of Pursuit podcast, your fantasy football home over at fakepigskin.com. I'm your host, Kyle Robert. You can follow me on Twitter at NotoriousKRO. With me tonight from the dog cage is Mad Dog. What's up, Mad Dog?
Hey, happy Labor Day to everybody out there watching, listening, and this is the time of year. I know Kyle and I were talking before we came on about just finally being done with the majority of our drafts and just finishing that up, and you can kind of like just finally exhale, and then this is when it all begins. It's like that. I want to say that it's like a race, and we're waiting for that gun to go off and just take off, but really what it is, it's a marathon. When you're thinking about 16-week season, well, technically for fantasy playoffs. If you're playing your championship in week 17, you probably shouldn't be playing in that league because the commissioner doesn't know what the hell he's doing. But
Hey,
yeah, I mean, this
that's
is
me. So I appreciate that.
the excitement is building, Kyle, and I don't know. I think I might have told you before, but yeah, I will be in Dallas for Sunday Night Football. I hope to see Zeke. Obviously, we're going to talk about him tonight. I mean, how can you not talk about Zeke right now?
Yeah, I finished up my last draft yesterday night. I think I'm done with them all. Obviously there's still time. And if you guys wanted to get into one more league, two more leagues, our friends over at Draft have a great promotion for you. Head over to playdraft.com/fakepigskin, or you can download it, from the Google Play Store, from the iTunes Store. Use the promo code fakepigskin. Put $5 in. You'll get an extra $3 to play with. You also get a year of Fake Pigskin Elite that expires September 7th. So make sure if you are considering doing that, you take advantage of that right now. Obviously, Ron, I know me and you, we're in a crazy amount of leagues, but the cool thing about our friends over at Draft is it's all best ball, and you can do, all these drafts. You don't have to worry about in-season management. You don't have to worry about the waiver wire. You don't have to worry about injuries. The computer will put all your best players in for you. It's a lot of fun, and if you want to get one more draft in before the season gets underway, I think that's the best way to do it.
100% with you, Kyle. I mean, again, you're finishing up all your drafts. You probably might still be jonesing a little bit to do one more or two more drafts. And like you said, it's just really it's low maintenance, and that's the key. I mean, I'm sure you probably extend yourself a little bit too much with the leagues that you're in. But this is something that you could just draft a team, like you said, just set it, forget it, and also want to say with the package you're getting with Fake Pigskin, I mean, you're getting. I mean, we're constantly bringing new writers onto the site.
Yep.
We have
I don't know if
guys that really
I
go
don't know
ahead.
if you saw it, but our guy Shane Hallam it just got just agreed to come on to Fake Pigskin covering Devi and covering Dynasty. I know both of us know his work very a lot, and he's highly respected. So he's another great guy to bring into the fold.
Oh, 100%. I wasn't sure if it was official, but I definitely heard that it was in the works. And
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, he's definitely one of the best Devy guys out there. But I mean, he's really good at Dynasty. I mean, he's good at any platform,
Yeah.
basically that has anything to do with fantasy football in general. I know we've had him on the show a few times. Always brings some fire, and this guy really knows football, and he's another great addition to the Fake Pigskin family. So again, much more to come, and you want to be able to have access to those articles and read about the next hot pickups and all that stuff and all the dynasty content that we're going to have. So yeah, we have it pretty much all covered on fakepigskin.com. But right now, I mean, this is an opportunity for you to get a really good deal, and at the same time, you know, do play draft and
Yep.
draft a few more teams.
Yep, and they're going to have DFS content as well, so you can play DFS there. It's a little bit of a different take on it, where you're actually drafting your DFS teams instead of just picking players based upon salary. So it's a unique take. It's a lot of fun. Make sure you check it out. Ron, I'm going to Las Vegas this weekend for a bachelor party for week one. Hopefully my liver can handle it. I'm not I've been prepping all week. I've been hydrating. I gotta make sure my body's ready to go. So if I'm a little sluggish when we come back next Monday, you'll know why.
You're assuming that you come back and you don't get locked
Yeah.
on the roof and you
So
get really bad case of sunburn. So
Yeah,
don't get locked in the trunk either.
who's gonna be more hungover on Monday, you or me?
I mean, that's a toss-up, man. I think it's going to be pretty damn close for both of us. And I know with that being a Sunday night game in Dallas, obviously kicking off Sunday night football,
Yeah.
and watching all those games throughout the afternoon, I'm sure I'm going to have like a pretty good head start for that game. So come kickoff, I'll be ready. But uh, Monday, I will be feeling it. So there's no
Absolutely.
doubt about that.
Yeah, that it should be an interesting show. We will be back on Wednesday for those of you listening to our show for the first time. I know we've been getting a nice bump the past week or two with our latest shows. If you missed any of those, you want to go back and check them out. We did some good stuff with Evan Silva. We did some risers. We did some fallers. We've been doing all the division previews, all that good stuff. Go check those out as well. But we appreciate everybody checking out. If you are joining us on YouTube, please leave questions. We are definitely willing to answer them. We will talk about as many as we can. But Ron, let's jump into it. There's a lot to get into, and let's start with Ezekiel Elliott. Just when we think, oh, for sure, 6 games. Rumors over the weekend and late last Friday about, oh, well, here's this and here's the arbitrator and here's this. Only one person actually talked to the girl that Zeke had the issue with. We're not going to really get into the politics as much, but if we basically tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern is when we're supposed to know whether or not Zeke is playing. If there's no ruling by then, Zeke will be available for week 1, and then he'll the potential for him to still be suspended for week 2, week 3 is definitely in the cards. Ron, I guess if you're venturing a guess, or let's start with this. If you're a Zeke owner and he's going to be suspended for 6 games, do you prefer the first 6 games, get it out of the way, knowing you can play the Jacquizz Rodgers, the Terrence West, the Rob Kellys, even Jeremy Hill if you're in a pinch, knowing that those guys will probably have the job for at least the first few weeks? Or would you rather have it play out? Maybe you start Zeke for 3 games, then you lose him for 6, and then you bring him back for the fantasy playoffs. Kind of what's the ideal situation for you, assuming it's 6 games?
Well, I think the ideal situation for me as a Zeke owner, and by the way, I've already got in my lineups. I said a lot of them today, and that's just me just being optimistic that he's definitely going to be playing week 1. I mean, the clock's ticking, like you said, 4 p.m. It doesn't sound like there's going to be, a ruling by then, and obviously that means he's playing week 1. So I think for me personally, in the leagues where I have Zeke and own him, and I would say hopefully everybody else has done the same, you've kind of made concessions the way that you drafted to kind of shore up whether it be like you said, adding a guy like Rob Kelly later or Jeremy Hill late to kind of weather the storm, or Darren McFadden. Obviously, you probably had to burn a top 10 round pick, 9th, 10th round pick to get him and handcuff him. But for me, I would personally rather see him play the first 4 or 5 weeks, then lose him for whatever it is. Maybe he gets reduced to 3 games, 4 games, whatever that is. We don't know. But the way I look at it is, if you can get that head start, you can get some, points rolling out of Zeke early on, kind of get off to a nice start, and then just be really aggressive with your fab money early on. If there's a player that pops out, if there's an injury in a backfield situation that opens up a starting role for a player that's sitting out there on the waiver wire, I think to me, it's good to you want to draft well, you want to feel good about coming out of your draft, but let's face the facts. You don't win or lose on draft day. It's more of that long grind that I was talking about before, and the waiver wire is the key to that. So it's kind of just, and then making some preemptive pickups along the way too, in some leagues can also help you out in a situation where you lose one of your top scorers. So for me, I'd much rather have him out there for the first 3 or 4 weeks, and then kind of worry about it, patch it together from there and make it work, as opposed to him being out early on. And that's the thing. We usually look at like a 4 to 6 week window when the season starts to kind of really get a feel of what's going on in the NFL with these teams and player situations and depth charts. And you don't really, there's that big unknown so early in the season. And why not, have the known with a superstar stud player in your lineup early on, and not have that concern, or just basically just throwing a dart and throwing a running back into your starting lineup that you really don't feel good about.
Yeah, I guess for me, it just depends. Like if I have Darren McFadden, I guess I'm a little more comfortable with starting with Zeke early and between Darren McFadden and the waiver wire, kind of figuring out a way if Zeke ends up going out, say week 4, week 5, and misses the middle of the chunk of the season. But if I don't, I'd rather him just miss the however many games you can and go from there. I think obviously the Jacquizz Rodgers, the Rob Kellys, those guys. Like I feel like I know those guys, and maybe the other names pop up, but at least I feel like I left my drafts with a plan in the where I have Zeke. And I'd rather execute that plan. If it ends up getting pushed back, all of a sudden Doug Martin's back, so Jacquizz Rodgers really isn't a guy you want to use, or maybe Samaje P. Ryan ends up becoming a thing, or even just cuts into carries, and now Rob Kelly's a timeshare if anything. And I don't know. It leaves more uncertainty. Yes, you could still hit a home run. Maybe you find the Jordan Howard. Maybe you find some guy off the waiver wire ends up working out. But I don't know. I did take Zeke in the second round last night and was able to get Darren McFadden a lot later than I expected. I know his ADP had risen, and with the uncertainty about Zeke and the potential of him not getting suspended or much shorter suspension, his ADP has kind of calmed down a little bit. But I do like having both those guys, and I feel pretty good about it. Let's talk about the other elephant in the room, though, and that's Andrew Luck. Ron, I know this is a guy that I think we all started the offseason going, oh, it'll be fine. Well, he'll be there. It'll all work itself out. And then as it kind of drug along, and no one's seen him throw, and all this stuff, and now he was removed off the PUP, which is a great sign if you're a Luck owner. But he's not starting week 1. Scott Solzine will be under center. I guess what's your general read on Luck and the Colts, and when are you reasonably expecting him to be back?
I don't think any of us can really, know for sure, certain, or really give too good of a play down for what's going to go down, because really we don't know. And we kind of saw this same song and dance before with Manning. I think back in 2011, I think it was obviously a little bit more. The injury with the spine and all that was a lot worse, and they were really coy about it back then with the situation. And then all of a sudden, boom, he's on IR, he's out for the season. So I'm not saying that's happening with Luck. I mean, I think right now, what is he throwing, tennis balls? So I mean, you can't feel great about the situation. I do think that there's, I'm a little optimistic, thinking maybe he's only gonna miss maybe 4 to 5 weeks at the most.
Yeah.
I mean, if he's out the first month of the season, and even in drafts, I had 2 keeper drafts last weekend, and I got him in the 10th round as a backup to Matt Ryan. So I felt pretty good about that, knowing that there does come a certain point where it's worth taking a risk on a player that's that elite level. If once he's out on the field, and that's Andrew Luck, yeah, he's going to take a lot of beatings out there with that offensive line. Maybe this is a good thing, Kyle, with their center being
Ryan
out
Kelly.
for the first few weeks. Yeah.
So and it looked like he was going to miss 6 weeks initially, but he didn't end up going on the PUP. They're saying he's actually looking a lot better and could be back sooner. So maybe it is when Ryan Kelly's available, then they'll put him back in and put Luck back in, and kind of get the offense where it needs to be. For me, it feels like it's at least 3 or 4 weeks. Obviously, if it was going to be 6, they would have put them both on the PUP. But, I think, 3-4 weeks sound about right to you?
That sounds about right. I would put the over-under on 4, and I'd probably go a little bit under. But, yeah, I think that's realistic. And I do want to say, though, if you're playing in leagues with team defenses, why not go pick up the LA Rams week 1? Because I did that in a couple leagues where I waited on defense. I mean, seriously, why not? Unless Aaron Donald, even if Aaron Donald's not playing, I still like the defense. But it sounds like he'll probably be out there. Hopefully he is.
I would expect him to be out there for sure. And you mentioned, so where did you take Andrew Luck in your draft over the weekend?
Well, this past weekend I got him in the 10th round, and I was kind of shocked because there was one owner who was from Indianapolis, and he he didn't take him, and I was like, well, you know what? At this point, I'm taking him. But in I think he won in the eighth or ninth in one of my other keeper leagues drafts. So you have to understand we keep two players in both those leagues. Well, the three and the one where I got him in the 10th. So that was even better value. And then I think you want to say he won in the ninth in my other keeper, 12 team keeper, where we only keep two players. And so, I mean, there's, 24 players, kept. So I think this year we had 23
Yeah.
because one team only kept one. But yeah, I mean, that's the ballpark where you can get him, and I feel pretty good about that. And maybe you just wait on QB altogether if you haven't drafted yet. Take him in the 10th round, and then say grab a guy later like a
Yep.
Wentz type, and then just ride out the storm. And then you got a QB1 hopefully by week 5,
Yeah,
and on.
I was thinking like ninth, 10th round is probably where I'm comfortable taking a gamble. It really depends on like kind of how the quarterbacks are coming off the board. If you're in a league that gets a little more aggressive, then obviously, you might have to take him a little earlier. But eighth, ninth, 10th, like I don't feel great about him. But at the same time, I was looking like Carson Palmer and the Cardinals have a great start to their schedule. I don't hate the idea of taking, Luck in the ninth or 10th and then grabbing Palmer with basically one of your last two picks. Let him start the season because he's got a nice schedule for the first 6 7 weeks, and then when Luck is back, when Ryan Kelly's back, when the offense is going, then you make the switch, and now you got Andrew Luck for basically the rest of the season plus the fantasy playoffs. I think you'll be in a great spot. If you drafted Luck already and Carson Palmer's not available, I love Sam Bradford in round for week 1 at home versus the New Orleans Saints. And even if you're in a deeper league, I don't hate Brian Hoyer either. At
How
home,
about your boy Kaiser, man?
uh,
Go ahead though.
uh,
You knew I was gonna say it.
yeah, I love Deshaun Kaiser, but week 1, I mean, he is at
Pittsburgh.
home, so that's nice. But the Steelers, we were talking about defenses a little bit. The Rams as a good play. Obviously, Houston versus Blake Bortles. I kind of like the Steelers too in week 1 against Deshaun Kaiser. I have big expectations for Kaiser. I love Corey Coleman. I love Kenny Britt. But I don't know if I feel comfortable enough in week 1. I'd rather roll the dice with Brian Hoyer at home. A Carolina defense that was atrocious against the pass a year ago, and I expect the Panthers to put up points. So the Niners are going to have to throw Pierre Garçon, Marquise Goodwin, even looking for Carlos Hyde in the passing game. This is a super super deep league, if you're in a normal 12, 14 type league, Sam Bradford's out there. I'm grabbing him any day of the week.
Yeah, and I kind of agree with you with your take with Kaiser, but I will say one thing, and we saw the Steelers pass rush really take off kind of in the last, quarter of the season, last, 4 to 6 weeks. They were really they improved a lot, and they've got some young players on that team. You also think about, I think the Browns led the league with quarterback sacks, and they had like 66 they gave up last year. But Kaiser is a little bit more mobile, and I also think with them probably getting behind in this game, they're going to be forced to have to try to make some big plays late in that game. And I think that's kind of where Kaiser, he might get off this slow start. But if he hits one or two big plays, maybe it's Corey Coleman or maybe it's Kenny Britt. That's the only thing. So, yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Maybe Bradford's safer, but I think Kaiser might have a little bit more upside. And, obviously it's hard to start any rookie that's, starting their first game ever. It is at home though, right? You said.
Which one?
Is it in the dog pound or is it?
Kaiser? Yeah, it's at home. So
Yeah.
being at home definitely helps. So if you're saying you'd start Deshaun Kaiser over Sam Bradford in week 1,
I actually would. If I'm
crazy.
going if I'm trying to hit a home run though, and I'm in that situation, my back's up against the wall, I just think Kaiser could still, produce points late in that game that would be garbage points, which are all gravy for us in fantasy football. We'll take them when we can get them, whenever that is. Um, with Bradford, I think that this might be the Cook show on wheels, and we're going to see a lot of Cook. And I don't know that offense is going to open up that much. And I mean, who's really? I mean, outside of Diggs and Rudolph, I mean,
Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs, Kyle Rudolph.
Yeah, I
I would
mean,
gladly take Sam Bradford. I know he's not sexy. I know he's not a a guy that you're like everyone's gonna be impressed that you own. But I think he has the chance to be a QB1 in Week 1, and I don't think Kaiser is there.
we will see. It's definitely risky, like I said, going with the rookie quarterback in his first start. So, yeah, if you want to go safer, I'd say Bradford. Like I said, if you're swinging for the fences and you feel like you're already, you know, in a deficit or you're not favored in your matchup, why not maybe go risky and go Kaiser?
Yeah, I guess it's a good way to go. So with luck out Week 1, are you playing any Colts?
Ooh, yeah, that's a tough situation because yes, I am a T.Y. Hilton owner, and I'm definitely not starting anyone in that. Maybe Gore, just because they're probably going to lean on that run, and I would think that Gore might be a sneaky play. I mean, he's old, reliable. You know what you're getting from Gore, and if he gets 20 carries, yeah, he should have 80 yards and probably might find the end zone. So with Hilton, I think the only way I'm starting Hilton is if I'm really not deep at receiver and I don't have some, second or third wide receivers that have, decent matchups that could produce for me. So I kind of, it depends on how deep I am at the wide receiver position, but I definitely wouldn't have a problem with maybe starting a guy like, believe it or not, maybe a Corey Coleman over T.Y. Hilton just week one.
No, I'm
Um,
100% with you there. I like the Corey Coleman call. I can't start any Colts. Someone mentioned Jack Doyle, and that would be tempting, but it would have to be like, if I punted tight end, obviously when you go to a big backup with Tolzien under
I'm
Jack
that
Doyle.
guy.
Yeah, I mean, Jack Doyle in a PPR, like, I could see you making the case, but I think I'd rather go with Cameron Brate. Would you rather go CJ Fedorowicz at home versus Jacksonville or Jack Doyle versus the Rams?
I actually kind of do like Jackie Doyle this week one with Tolzien. I feel like he's not gonna be a quarterback airing it out by any means, so he's gonna be looking for the safety valve. The thing with Fedorowicz, he's one of my guys, you know that, but he's been kind of banged up and he hasn't played much in preseason, so I would kind of want to see something from Fedorowicz first
Yeah,
before I totally buy into starting him. But I also like the break call. I'm not sure who Tampa Bay's playing. I'm not week one,
they play
but I think
Miami.
that yeah, I think that could be a sneaky call. I think I'd probably go Bray, Doyle, then Fedorowicz, kind of in that order of who's available. If you
Yeah,
have, if you punt a tight end, just like you
yeah.
said.
I think I'm with you. I think in standard leagues or half point, I'd probably go with Fedorowicz over Doyle. If it's full PPR, I think Doyle definitely provides that safety, and I could see him easily have a 5, 6, 7 catch type game, um, and be a guy in PPR leagues that really helps you in week 1. It's so scary, especially without Ryan
It
Kelly,
is.
and that's why like I don't know if I could play Frank Gore either. I think I would try and find somebody else, but um, it could we'll see
Frank
how.
Frank Gore or Jeremy Hill?
Oh,
Rapid fire. See, I did that
Jeremy
to you.
Hill, Jeremy Hill.
Okay. I'm gonna stick with Gore.
All right. Well, that's the beautiful part, Ron, is we'll actually get to see some of this stuff come to fruition in week 1, and that will make things very, very interesting. Let's talk about some roster moves. There's been some moves, some interesting stuff. Actually, we can stay in Indy and talk about Mr. Matt Jones. He's finally been freed. The Redskins finally cut him loose, and he signed with the Indianapolis Colts. Obviously, Marlon Mack's there. Robert Turbin is there behind Frank Gore. If you're ranking the guys behind Gore, Turbin, Mack, Matt Jones, kind of what's your order?
Well, I mean, the vet right now, I think Turbin's got, the stranglehold on that number two position, behind Gore. I definitely see Mack as being the most explosive, most interesting option as far as, fantasy goes long term this season.
Do you think
He would be the
he's
guy.
do you think he's a guy that can be a full 3 down guy, or do you think he's just a PPR kind of like change of pace type running back?
I think he could develop into a full three down running back, but I think this year as a rookie, I mean, temper our expectations, pump the brakes a little bit. We know how explosive he was in college, but also, I mean, he had a lot of runs for negative yardage or less than a yard in college also. So, he hits the home run, but he also gets stopped a lot for, negative yardage. So, to me, I would probably, if I guess if your question who am I handcuffing Gore to, it's
Yeah.
probably going to be Mac. Who gets the early season work in that number two role? I think it's going to be more Turbin, and I think Jones is kind of that guy that's just kind of lurking in the shadows and in the weeds, waiting to pop out and get an opportunity. But again, he's got to learn the offense. They have to feel comfortable about putting him out there and not get later on down the road get Andrew Luck blown up. Assuming Luck's back by week 3 or 4, which hopefully he is, or sooner. So I mean that's one thing to think about too with Jones. But it's interesting. It's definitely a nice landing spot for him because of the offense, and we know that there's still question marks in this backfield. And that's why we're talking about it outside of Gore. And if there was an injury to happen to Gore, any one of these guys could possibly be the guy. And I just
Yeah.
think I'd probably I have Jones and Mac over Turbin if I'm looking, again, longer term throughout the season.
Yeah, if I'm looking at just this year, it's probably Bobby Turbin for me as a guy that if Frank Gore went down, I think Turbin would kind of step in as that first and second down banger, and then Matt kind of as the third down guy. If Matt Jones got dropped in your deep leagues or in dynasty leagues, is he a guy that you're willing to kind of throw on the back of your bench and see if anything actually becomes of him?
Most definitely, if I have a taxi squad spot opened up or I have a deep roster, I would take a shot on him, especially if you have some depth issues at running back situation or a position in general. But yeah, I mean, again, I think it's just more the landing spot, and maybe the guy is really hungry, and I know he's got a good agent who, got him on board, and he's been pretty much asking to be released, traded, cut for so long,
Mm-hmm.
and we kind of saw the handwriting on the wall too with that, and they were kind of talking him up, I think, in an effort to try and get a good a trade back, a piece, maybe a small piece back for him, but obviously nobody bit, and here we are. So yeah, I mean, I think he's interesting, but again, more of a stash in hope.
In a move that makes you really scratch your head, the Buffalo Bills cut Jonathan Williams, but then he wasn't claimed by any team. Kind of a weird situation. Obviously, we don't, we saw him stand around at the Senior Bowl. He's obviously a guy with an injury riddled past, but was looking pretty good in preseason. Looked to be the number 2 guy there in Buffalo. Now they're going with Mike Tolbert, which is that's a whole nother thing. Um, is Jonathan Williams? Are you watching to kind of see if he ends up somewhere, or do you think by Buffalo cutting him and nobody really claiming him, the NFL's kind of telling us that they're not interested at this point?
Yeah, I mean, outside of a few good runs he did have in preseason, I mean, what really has he shown or has he flashed to really get anyone excited, especially as far as these teams? The fact that he went unclaimed, I think that kind of says it all in a nutshell. How they feel about him, and maybe more it's more about the health concerns, just staying healthy, staying on the field, and really, I mean, at this point, I think most of the teams are pretty set in a at the running back position with their current depth chart. There might be some injuries, which might open up a situation where he could get signed somewhere, but I mean, even a place like maybe San Francisco out there close to you, Kyle, might make a little bit of sense. But yeah, I don't know if there's a team out there. I mean, maybe even if there's an injury, say to Abdullah, God forbid, I'll cry. But he could catch on in somewhere like Detroit. But yeah, I think it'll be kind of that wait and see approach, and until an opportunity opens itself, a door opens. I don't think his phone's going to be ringing anytime soon. What do you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah, I don't know. I was trying to get optimistic just because we've seen, running backs in Buffalo kind of have standalone success, even when Shady has played, and the potential for McCoy to go down is always there. I was kind of arguing with some of my league mates last night about, with Jonathan Williams gone, is Mike Tolbert a guy that if McCoy goes down, you would ever consider like actually playing, or do you think, it's gonna be, obviously they'll give Tolbert the ball. I mean, we did see it. What was it, 2 years ago when Booby Dixon was kind of the guy. I, I just
Booby.
I just like can you envision a scenario where you're like, yeah, let me put Mike Tolbert in my RB2 slot this week. He's got a matchup with the Jets or the I don't know, some bad defense, like they're playing the Browns, whatever. Like, do you go? Yep, I'm putting Mike Tolbert in my lineup because for me, I don't know that I can.
No way. There's no way in hell that I would even consider doing that. But I want to circle back right real quick with Jonathan Williams because one of my takes was maybe they just didn't want to give him a guaranteed contract and they were going to sign him back in the practice squad. Obviously, it hasn't happened yet,
Yeah.
but it could. I think what they would do in that situation that you brought up with an injury to Shady would be they would probably bring back Jonathan Williams. So maybe
Yeah.
he would be a guy that would make sense for them. Also, think about the fact that the Jets have been, dangling
Forte.
Forte out there. So I mean, he's
That's what they
another guy
need.
that,
That's what they need.
yeah.
Another old running back.
So to answer your question, yeah, I think they would either bring a guy in that's already known the system like Williams, or they would go out and get somebody before they give, all the carries to Mike Tolbert, who's really just that thumper running back who blocks really well and adds that element to the offense. But really, I mean, he's not a guy you're gonna hitch your trailer to and lean on as a bell cow running back anytime soon.
Yeah, especially when Nathan Peterman's under center. Like they're already using the concussion thing Tyrod's dealing with as a way to get Peterman under center for week 1. So like
Peterman's ready though, Kyle. Come on,
well,
man,
that's
he
what
is
they
ready.
said. That's what they told us. They let us know that. I don't know. I don't know what the Bills are doing, man. The Bills and Jets are having a battle to see who can be like the worst team in the state of New York, and it's quite the doozy.
You know the
Let's
difference though, Kyle, is I actually want to own Bills players in fantasy like McCoy and Zay Jones and some of these other, even Charles Clay. The
Yeah, let me
difference is
ask you.
I don't want any Jets.
We were
Like stay
talking
away
about
from.
we were talking about tight ends with Doyle, with Fedorowicz, Cameron Brate. Where does Charles Clay rank, especially for week 1 against those Jets?
I like him a lot, and I like him even more if Peterman's under center. Again, rookie quarterbacks typically cling to their tight ends. They're not trying to make big
You
plays.
always got to cling to that tight end, Ron. It's number
Cling
one
to that tight
strategy.
end, and if you got a good one, I mean, Clay did lead their team in receptions last year, and that says a lot. I mean, obviously with Sammy Watkins' injury, but I mean, honestly, he's been pretty reliable, and he's had some big games. I know he had a few big games last year in the fantasy playoffs stretch. So this is a guy that, yeah, he's knows the system, and they know how to use him, and they're going to use him. So I like him more than Fedorowicz this week. I think he's pretty close to Braid. I'll break the tie. I'll say this much: if Tyrod's out there, I could go with Clay, but I would probably prefer to go with Braid over, you know, Clay with
Yeah.
Peterman under center because there's just not that you don't have anything to really bank on. No reliability. I mean, we know the connection between Braid and Winston is good. I mean, we talked about that with Harmon when we did the NFC South preview, and I think we all agreed that Braid's definitely been undervalued, and his breakout last year was legit, and he's not going to be a one-year wonder.
Yep. So the Browns got Kason Williams, who was cut by the Seahawks. Kason Williams is a guy that I know football Twitter, draft Twitter was all excited about when he was leaving Washington. Kind of went undrafted, ended up with the Seahawks. We kind of started to talk ourselves into him this year. He was in that, it was obviously Lockett and Baldwin, but then after that, Jermaine Kearse got sent to the Jets. Paul Richardson's floating around. Kason Williams, he was, people were kind of starting to get a little excited. He ended up getting cut, but now he's hooked on with the Browns, and they're talking. Oh, Ricardo Luis is going to be their wide receiver 3. But I don't know. Kason Williams is a guy that's interesting to me. Obviously, in redraft, you're not adding him at any point. But is he a guy that you're kind of keeping an eye on to see if something can emerge? Maybe obviously Kenny Britt's dealt with injuries. Maybe he goes down. Maybe Kason Williams finds a way a month into the season to kind of enter the starting lineup. Is he a guy you're watch listing? Is he a guy you're doing within Dynasty, or are you just gonna kind of wait for something to happen before you make any moves?
Yeah, in redraft, he's definitely on my watch list. In dynasties, I actually dynasty leagues, I would want to go out and add him because I'm sure a lot of impatient owners already dropped him before there was news that the Browns signed him. So,
Yeah.
that's the one thing about it is we get impatient, we make these cuts, and in dynasty, I know this past week there's all these mandatory cuts, cut
Yep.
downs that we
All
have to
my
do.
leagues, I cut probably
Yes,
3 to 5 players in all my leagues. So, a lot of these kind of guys end up on the waiver wire. So, now's the
and
time.
also Higgins was cut too, Harmon's guy, and he
Yeah.
was a guy that really was amazing in college at Colorado State. So they gave up on him, and also they gave up on the guy that we saw at Senior Bowl this past year, and Jordan Payton
Yep.
from UCLA out your
UCLA.
way. So yeah, so two of those receivers they drafted last year gone. Lewis is definitely interesting. So yeah, I think Williams is a guy that is definitely interesting as a stash in dynasty for me.
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with you. Let's talk about another Williams, and that's Mike Williams. This is a guy that I think as a fantasy football community we were all in on when he got drafted by the Chargers in the top 10. Then we kind of cooled on him. He was dealing with back injuries. There was, oh, he's going to miss the whole year. Then it got to, well, he's probably going to start the year on PUP. He's not on the PUP. Obviously, he's still dealing with a little bit of issues, but he should be back on the field in less than 6 weeks. Is he a guy that if you have a bench spot that, you're kind of like taking an upside shot? Like, is he a guy that makes sense? Like, obviously, I don't want to compare him to Odell Beckham, but, people forget Odell Beckham's first 4 games, like, he did not play at all. And then all of a sudden, the last 12, he came on really strong. Do you think Mike Williams
Yeah,
has a chance to be kind of a fantasy difference maker over the second half of the year?
I think he totally can be, and this is a guy that I definitely have been going to add, especially in my ESPN leagues where I have an IR slot open and available. He's a guy that I've been going out and picking up and stashing him down there because, just like you said, I mean, you never know. He's not Odell Beckham Jr., but I think the offense that he's in, and if there was an injury ahead of him, if God forbid Keenan Allen went down, or we saw Tyrell Williams went down,
Yep.
that's a situation where, yeah, outside of Travis Benjamin, there's really not that much depth between those guys. I don't know if those other guys got cut or not. What
Yeah. Yeah.
Dontrell did Inman did
Dontrell
he get
Inman, I
cut?
don't have to look.
Yeah,
Um,
so I mean, there's guys there that are just they're Jags. I mean,
yep.
outside the
But I mean,
top
this
three,
is this is a guy that was a top 10 pick, a guy that people were saying it was him or Corey Davis for the number one wide receiver in the class. Like, obviously, he's got a ton of
speaking
ton
of
of.
that, Kyle did my last dynasty draft last night, and actually, believe it or not.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I thought I lost you for a second.
Yeah, you
I
did.
was
I,
just
I my sound just went away. I don't know what happened. Um, I trying to
no,
figure
I was
out.
just 100% with you on adding Williams where you can.
Yeah, this is the beautiful part of live shows, everyone. We completely lost our sound, but we are back. Thanks for your patience. Yeah, I'm with you on Williams. I think there's a lot of potential, and we'll see what happens. Let's talk about a trade. We have a trade, and I think this gives us a lot of clarity into kind of where the Colts are with Andrew Luck, and the Colts traded Philip Dorsett. Maybe he was going to be a cap casualty anyways, a roster casualty, a guy they were going to cut. And they trade him to New England for Jacoby Brissett. So let's start from a Colts perspective. Obviously, you can't come in and just play quarterback right away. Obviously, you have to learn the system. Obviously, there's a lot to underwhelm. If you're talking about Brissett, like, do you think there's a non-zero chance that we see him play before Andrew Luck, or do you think, this is just insurance, this is backup, and Tolzien will start the first 3, 4, 5 games, and then when Luck comes back, it's his show, and this is just a guy that could potentially help him going forward?
I think it's a little bit of both. I could definitely see where Tolzien, falls flat on his face, doesn't do much with this offense. If Luck's out for any longer than, say, the 3 to 4 weeks, which we're kind of thinking in our head is kind of, what we're estimating, which is hard to do. Yeah, I mean, Brissett has some experience starting. Obviously, he was the starter when Brady was suspended last year, so we saw that, and he did okay. I mean, so this is a player that still, when he came into the NFL, I mean, we saw him again at Senior Bowl. This was a guy that was a developmental project. I mean, quarterback at the position, and I think he obviously, he learned a lot from a guy like Tom Brady, who's probably one of the best quarterbacks to ever, play the game. So in that system, I kind of like this trade from the Colts perspective, and kind of gives them, like you said, it gives them that insurance plan if this is a long-term injury or a extended absence for Luck. And then also what we kind of talked about earlier, touching on the offensive line woes and the possibility Luck comes back and takes another hit and he's out an extended period of time. You have someone else to fall back on other than Scott Tolzien. But yeah, I mean, I could see Brissett maybe getting a start week 3, week 4 if Luck's still out. So I mean, it's a situation to monitor, but definitely he's better than Tolzien, but he doesn't know the system, and he's going to have to learn it.
In redraft formats, but like Superflex or 2 QB leagues, is he a guy that if you could add him to your roster, is he a guy that you're, is it worth taking a shot for this season as a guy that you could throw him on the back of your roster and see if he actually gets starts?
Well, I'll say 100% add if you have Luck. I mean, it's not even a question. You got to go out and get him like now. Spend a little bit of your fab money, especially in the 2 QB Superflex formats. And yeah, I mean, as a stash, if you don't have that depth, even if you don't have Luck, you don't have depth at that position, you always want to try and add players that could start down the line. I mean, even guys like Chad Henne, yeah, he's not sexy, but he's a guy that could help you on a bye week where say you only have 2 startable quarterbacks, and as it is, and you're playing 2 QB league, when the bye weeks come, I mean, you have to have something to fall back on. So you have to make a trade, or you have to, find a quarterback that might actually be able to start and plug in for just maybe that 1 bye week or 2 bye weeks for both your quarterbacks when those weeks come up. So that's something to kind of look down the road and kind of prepare for.
Yeah. No.
So yeah, I'd add him.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's definitely worth an add. And, we talked about that terrible offensive line. Brissett's got some wheels. He's a guy that can use mobility to kind of circumvent some of that bad offensive line play. So I definitely think he's a guy that's worth looking at. Let's talk about it from Dorsett's side, though, because he's all, one last thing before we leave. My only kind of pump the brakes moment is Matt Castle, Brian Hoyer. Even he's a little bit better, but some of these guys that we've seen leave New England, it seems like when they're comfortable letting them go, it's for good reason. And I guess that would be my only slight hesitation on Brissett, that maybe the Colts or the Belichick and company realize, yeah, this guy really can't be a week in and week out starter, so we'll move him. I mean, they do have Jimmy G, so maybe if he's not there, it's a little bit different, but I don't know, just something to kind of keep in the back of your head.
Yeah, I think with the Jimmy G point, though, I think that's more of it for me is the fact that they had a viable option and he was third on the depth chart. And I get it, Castle, yeah, I mean, you said it all with the Castle. But Hoyer, though, I mean, he did have the 1 year with the Texans and Nuke's breakout season. So not a total bust, and we're going to see him again with the 49ers this year
Yep.
out there on the West Coast. So we'll see if Hoyer can muster up some big games for Shanahan, and he can kind of mold him. But yeah, it's an interesting situation. So back
Yeah.
to Dorsett.
Yeah, talk about
This
Dorsett with me because obviously a guy that was a first round pick, so people obviously were pretty excited about him. We thought he could be a thing. I remember talking with Dennis about well, T.Y. Hilton's contract's running out and they could let him walk and Dorsett could step right in and obviously they end up signing T.Y. to a huge deal, but is Dorsett becoming a guy that's more interesting to you now, especially with Edelman out for the year, or is this just a guy kind of filling up roster space? Like, where are you at with him?
Well, first of all, I think we can all agree that when the Colts picked Dorsett in the first round, I think it was late in the first round, we were all like, "What the hell just happened?" Our jaws on the ground. I mean, why did they had so many team needs and they went after Dorsett? So yeah, I mean, we had the whole contract situation with Hilton, and I get that, but I mean, to me, this is a guy they basically just burned a first round pick on and then completely just gave up on it. And I get that they have the depth at the receiver position to do that. And they have a need now with at the quarterback position. So I mean that makes sense. But I mean for the Colts, I just think they totally just swung and missed. And if anything, they should have given this guy a little bit more time to develop before they know exactly what they have in him. I would say if they were willing to give him up, a former first round draft pick, give him up for what they gave him up for, then they don't really believe he's ever going to be that player, and they're basically just washing their hands of him. Having said that, I think any receiver that goes to New England that isn't a veteran or hasn't been in the league for a long period of time and hasn't had that exposure and kind of been out there in the trenches. To me, it's a steep learning curve with doing New England Patriots offense and learning, all the routes that they have to run. And, Tom Brady's going to be the first guy to yell at, these receivers and get on top of them and just give it to them. And I just don't know if Dorsett's going to be a guy that's going to be a quick learner, a quick study, and B, a guy that, proves to be, someone they can trust out there to run the right route, to, be where he's supposed to be for Brady. So, uh, in Dynasty, I guess maybe he's a little interesting now. I mean, a little more interesting because of the landing spot and
Yeah.
maybe the potential. But to me, in redraft, this doesn't move the needle at all for me. And again, I don't really feel like there's not much to get excited about with Dorsett at all. I mean, he's not proved to be any type of a consistent option. Maybe a big play option. He might hit a big play here and there. But again, he's got to
Right.
learn that system.
But we still are talking about a team that has Gronk, a team that this year has Brandon Cooks, Chris Hogan, Malcolm Mitchell, Danny Amendola, the two running backs. Like, there's just so many mouths to feed. James White, Deion Lewis, Rex Burkhead. Theoretically in Dynasty, should be back next year. Cooks should still be there. Malcolm Mitchell should be a thing. Chris Hogan can be a thing. Like,
Dwayne Allen.
yeah, Dwayne Allen, Rob Gronkowski. Like, there's just so many names, so many potential mouths to feed. I think it's an upside shot the Patriots took, realizing that it's a good gamble, but I don't know. I don't
I
see
mean, how many of
anything
these
there.
receivers that the New England picks up and trades for? I mean, outside of like the elite options or like Cooks, actually really pan out for them. A lot of them end up getting cut, shortly after they, sign them or trade for them because they just can't. I mean, well, Chad Johnson was a good, Ocho Cinco was a good example of that, and he was a veteran. So it's like if he
Yeah.
can't learn those routes, how can Dorsett learn these routes
Yeah,
and
I mean,
as a
there's no
30-year player?
way in Dynasty or Redraft you're taking Dorsett over Hogan or Mitchell, right?
Oh no way,
Yeah.
not for me.
So I mean, that's kind of I think we're both on the same page. Let's. I'm gonna throw out a few names that got put on practice squads, and I want you to tell me one if you'd add them in dynasty leagues, and two if you're watching them for redraft formats. So Alex Collins to the Ravens, Jeremy Langford to the Ravens, Jeremy McNichols to the 49ers, and Elijah Hood got cut by the Raiders but ended up signing with their practice squad. So those four running backs, are any of them guys you're like looking to add? in terms of dynasty, especially if it's deeper dynasty?
I'm gonna stick with the top player on that list, running back for me would be Hood, because he's staying with the same team,
Yep.
and they obviously liked him enough to hold on to him and put him on the practice squad. And then from the dynasty, lens view here, long term view, we have Lynch, who's probably only going to play. Maybe he plays 2 more years. So I think Hood definitely could be a guy that could earn a role as soon as 2018. So this is a guy that I would much rather throw in my taxi squad stash. Um, it's tough because McNichols was also that guy that got a lot of hype, pre-draft hype, and then fell into a situation where we thought was actually a good situation long term, and then
Yeah.
they end up just giving up on him completely. So he'd probably be my second guy just because I think, in PPR leagues and Dynasty is a deep like stash. He is now with the 49ers, and we know Hyde's had some issues with injuries. He can't play a full year. We've seen that time and time again. As much as I like Hyde, but we have to be cognizant of that. And then also Joe Williams went on IR, so you have one player behind him. I think also
Matt Breida's
Hightower
there.
got cut.
Hightower
Yeah,
got
and
cut,
Hightower.
and Matt Breida's
Mhm.
there. Matt Breida's more of like a third down pass catcher. Um, yeah, I'm
So
with you.
McNichols for me, those two guys. Yeah.
I'm with you on Hood. I honestly like if there's a scenario where Marshawn Lynch gets hurt, I could see them putting Elijah Hood on the 53-man roster and letting him be kind of that first and second down running back. Uh, Alex
Yes,
Collins,
exactly, because he
yeah,
profiles better for that first and second down role than Washington or
100%.
Rashard.
Yeah, the Ravens is a mess. As one of our watchers is it pointed out. I mean, they obviously have Terrence West, they have Danny Woodhead, Buck Allen's still thing, but Alex Collins, Jeremy Langford, both on the practice squad. Like, they could see time theoretically. Like, if you're taking a shot on one of those guys, Collins or Langford, who do you like more for the near future?
Oh, in PPR, it's definitely Langford for me. And I know the guy's, averaged under 4 yards a carry every year since he's come into the league. But he catches passes. He has good hands. I thought he was. I watched, I think, the third preseason game, and I thought he showed a little bit of something, to get not get excited, but I thought he showed enough to stay, on the team.
Yeah.
And I think this says more about the Bears situation with Tariq Cohen, how much they like this kid and how much they are willing to lean on Jordan Howard this year in the running game. And then I think Carey's also, he's going to be out for the first 6 weeks. So that was an interesting cut for me from the Bears perspective. And then the signing here with the Ravens, I do like it from the perspective that he would need a couple of injuries ahead of him. Woodhead's never been hurt before, right? So I mean that couldn't happen. And then,
And
if you're giving Woodhead,
Terrence West, the all-time MVP, obviously, like
right?
it's not like he was flirting around with a bunch of practice squads. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely an They're gonna. I mean, there's a very good shot. That an opportunity opens up. I think Alex Collins would be my guy. I think between Chris Carson's emergence, Procise, Thomas Rawls, Eddie Lacy, there's just too many mouths to feed. They had to let a running back go, and unfortunately that was Alex Collins. But I still like him. I still think he has a lot of talent, and I know you're always gonna bang the drum for Langford, but I just
Well, speaking of Carson, are you stashing any of these guys in Dynasty over Carson?
no, I'm adding Chris Carson in redraft league. That's
Okay.
where I'm at with him. I'm putting
Really?
like yeah. I think he has the potential to be a thing. I wanted to be in on Eddie Lacy so bad, but it's just not happening, and he's always hurt or out of shape or just looks plotty. Thomas Rawls, obviously when he plays has looked great, but has had his moments where he's injured and then gone, and CJ Prosise, another guy I like. But I think Chris Carson has the potential to be a thing. I mean, he kind of has that what Thomas Rawls was before he broke out, and nobody wanted to believe it, and everyone thought, oh, Marshawn Lynch and this and that, and then he busts out and becomes a fantasy difference maker. Chris Carson's a guy like all of my redraft leagues. If I can do my last pick or my second to last pick with him, like I that's a gamble, and maybe I don't hold. I'm obviously not holding him all year, but I'm holding him for the first month, see what happens. When the bye weeks start hitting, when I'm starting to have to make some serious moves, he'll probably be one of my first cuts, assuming he hasn't taken over the role. But at this point, he's definitely one of my favorite, guys to take at the very end and see what happens.
I was just going to say to your point and further cement that. I mean, if you did draft Lacey, like I know I did in a few leagues, and I grabbed Procise, um, I think that if you don't get Procise, you could get Carson really late. And even if it's Rawls, if you have Rawls, and you want to pick up another running back there to kind of just see what happens. Yeah, I think Carson is that guy, because you're going to have to pay. He's basically free.
Yeah.
Obviously, if you're doing redraft leagues right now, and then he's definitely going to be a hot ad on most of the first waiver fab runs in dynasty leagues too. I mean, he's going to be a guy this week that people are going to blow a lot of money on, and I think you're right. I mean, I think he's a guy that needs to be owned in those formats, especially. And if you're buying into the Seattle backfield at all, if you have any of those pieces, yeah, he's a guy that you want to, go out and get.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just I don't know. I'm going back and forth on the Seattle backfield. I don't think they're going to run quite as much as we kind of expect, but I think there's a potential for someone to be, a real thing. I want to ask you, Ron, is there anybody else that kind of fits in that Chris Carson bucket for you as a guy that, you're trying to grab at the end of drafts? That you're kind of using as a stash. Maybe people are kind of adjusting their rosters post draft and looking at the waiver wire. Is there someone on the waiver wire that you're going, oh, I want to make sure I add them in a few places just to see if something happens?
Well, I think we've talked about him before, but Jamal Williams would be that guy in redraft, especially if you have Ty Montgomery and you need to go out and get Jamal Williams. He has, I mean, in preseason he caught some passes. One thing that a lot of people, knocked him for was not catching a lot of balls at BYU over the course of his career, but he wasn't asked to do that in that phase of his game. So he's definitely would be at the top of my list of those running backs that could really hit this year and hit big if the door opens for him, the opportunity presents itself. And I think the other guy would be staying in the same conference, NFC North here. I'm going to go with my guy, Tariq Cohen. I think this guy, seriously, if there was something, even without, he's going to have standalone value, I think, in PPR leagues, maybe more as like a bye week type of player, flex play. But I think this is a guy that, like I said before, with them cutting Langford with carry out, there's really nobody else. I know Benny Cunningham's there, but again, I look at him as just a guy. I think Cohen's a guy that really, with that 4.4 speed, he can get out there and make some big plays, and he can catch the ball really well. I think he had almost 100 receptions in college over his collegiate career. So, again, in PPR leagues, he's a guy that really interests me a lot, and they're really saying a lot of good things about him. They've been saying him since they took him, but even now with preseason, he's really shown well, and I think this is a guy that, again, definitely handcuff him to Howard, but like your Carson take, I'm 100% on board with that. Cohen's the other guy that I'd pivot to, and I'd want to own him also. Can't
Yeah,
own probably both of them, but
no,
one of the
no,
two.
no Tyreek Cohen for me. Like I think he has a good burst. I think he'll be a nice change of pace for Jordan Howard. But I just can't envision a scenario where he's the guy, even in like a Darren Sproul. Like I'd rather have Darren Sproles, rather have Chris Thompson, I'd rather have, Rex Burkhead. Like there's just so many of those kind of guys that I would rather take my shots on. But I guess we'll have to see. Malcolm Mitchell's another guy that, especially if you miss out on Chris Hogan, he goes too high for you. I do think Malcolm Mitchell could have potential. I like Alvin Kamara in New Orleans. I don't think there's I think there's a legit scenario where Peterson's just not good and Mark Ingram gets hurt and now Alvin Kamara is your starter. Like I could see that being a thing. So I just wanted to throw out a few names before we finish up this section of kind of guys I'm targeting super late. So Ron, let's go through it and let's throw out a few bold calls. A few, these aren't things that I don't want to say that we don't believe, but we're not saying this is gonna happen. But if we're putting our money where our mouth is, we're kind of predicting. We want to be a little aggressive with these takes. So Ron, We'll kind of go back and forth. You said you had three. I can definitely have three to come with, but um, if you're looking if you're looking and kind of ready to make a bold call, why don't you hit me with one?
I want to start by upsetting you quite a bit, Kyle, and I'm gonna go up to Green Bay. I'm gonna say that Randall Cobb outscores your guy Jordy Nelson this year in PPR, and
Wow,
yeah, you said be bold, so I'm bringing you bold, man. It's the
that
the boldest one first, but
that is
and
bold.
also having said that, he's going to outscore Devontae Adams. So maybe you agree with me on the latter part, but I'm sure you're not going to agree with me on the first call with him outscoring Jordy Nelson. So. Not predicting an injury here, Kyle. I don't want to do that. I don't want to wreck your fantasy teams already before the season even starts. But
Yeah,
I just feel like with Cobb, we've seen 2 years in a row that have been just, utter disappointment, and he's just fallen to the point where you can get this guy in double-digit rounds in redraft leagues. Nobody really wants to take a chance on him, but he's still so young. I think he's still only like 28 or 29 years old, or actually, I think he's younger than that. And I still think that there's going to be an emphasis. There's going to be more attention paid to Adams this year, and obviously the attention is always going to be on Nelson. And I just feel like with Cobb, he's going to be that guy that kind of feasts and kind of takes advantage of that,
yeah.
of the coverage is kind of drawn in the other direction. So it opens some hole, so, some room up for him to get open. And I just feel like we saw 2 seasons from him that he really wasn't healthy. He battled injuries. I mean, he was miscast as a wide receiver one when Nelson went down. That was a tough role to be in for him.
Yeah,
And then
that
last year,
that whole
he was
offense
banged
just
up.
just fell apart without Jordy Nelson. So
Exactly.
I don't think we can blame it. I'm looking at, like, he had 126 targets in 2014. He had 129 in 2015. I am one. Okay, so let there. So you're saying that you think if Jordy plays 16 and Cobb plays 16, that Cobb could outscore Jordy? Is that what you're not predicting that
No,
here?
I'm saying that about Adams. My caveat would be with Nelson. I feel like he's going to miss a few games, which kind
Okay.
of knock him down a little bit. So that would be my reasoning there. I mean, I don't want you to think I'm totally crazy here, Kyle, but yeah, I think if Jordy's healthy, 16 games, yeah, I mean that's a really bold call for me. But again, I really do feel like if something happens or he is to sit out a few games for whatever reason, I think Cobb's going to be a beneficiary there, and I think that they're going to try and get him the ball more and involve him more this year, regardless of the depth chart and who's at the top of that pecking order. So I feel like that's an emphasis they're going to, you know, definitely try and do that. And I think Cobb's a guy that people were just totally just forgetting about and
100%.
poo-pooing.
I'm 100% with you on that. And I'm going to piggyback your bold call with my bold call, and that Devontae Adams will not be a top 40 fantasy wide receiver in all formats.
Whoa. That's
This
bold, man.
people are going loco for Devontae Adams, and I do not get it. I feel like, and I've kind of experienced this with some of my home leagues, that people are so, whatever happened last year is what you should expect for this year, and you just pencil in. I mean, he had 12 touchdowns, but guys, the two previous seasons he had 4 touchdowns total. He had 400 yards in each of those seasons. Like, I don't think he'll completely go away, but I think he's a lot closer to basically being the third or fourth option in the offense. I think Ty Montgomery takes some catches. I think Martellus Bennett's a thing. I'm with you on Cobb. I mean, I'm looking at let me go to my projections for Devontae
Yeah, I was just
Adams.
going to ask you, yeah, what projections you had for Bennett as far as receiving touchdowns, and then if you look at Cobb, say Cobb has a bump while you're looking that up, Kyle. Say Cobb goes up to say 8 or 9 touchdowns, and with Bennett, I mean, I think he's good for what 6 or 7, possibly 6 or 7 being like his floor.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, 100% with you. I think um, I'll say this much: if you're drafting Adams to be your wide receiver 2 in fantasy, I think you're definitely totally swinging and missing. I think he's going to be more like a wide receiver 3 this year, and he's going to have some big weeks. But I'm 100% with you, man. I'm not. I don't own Adams anywhere, and I don't want to because I would not pay the premium to own him in any of my drafts so far.
Yeah, I mean, I have him like for like 700 yards and 7 touchdowns, and
For Bennett or Adams?
for Adams.
Adams.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's kind of what I have Bennett for. Like Bennett, I have he's my tight end 7. I have him for 800 yards and 6 touchdowns. So, like, I think Cobb cuts out a big chunk of the yards, and if those 7 touchdowns I have Adams predicted for become 5, then he's all not even worthy of a top 40 receiver. So, I don't buy Devontae Adams at all. I just think
Well,
there's
you're doing exactly what you just said, Kyle. You're buying him for that. You're paying that premium for what he did last year and those touchdowns that he scored last year, and they're not predictable. I mean, we can't base everything on last year. Like you said, you look at the 3-year window.
yep.
I think you laid it out there pretty well. I mean, that's what we need to look at. What's the outlier, Kyle? And I think you just pointed it out. It's last year.
Yep. So it's good to hear we're both in on Adams, obviously, and we like the bump up for Cobb. Why don't you hit me with number 2, Ron?
This one, and I wanted to say something earlier, but I was saving it because we kind of touched on this briefly. But Jaquez Rogers, believe it or not, I think he finishes at a top 20 PPR running back this year. I think he comes out, the first 3 weeks of the season and just, completely just does everything right. Catches passes. I mean, this is a guy that can catch 4 to 5 passes a game in PPR leagues. That's money. And he's going to be getting the bulk of the workload, running the ball between the tackles, because we all know that Charles Sims is not that guy, and he cannot withstand, the rigors of, playing more than maybe 10 snaps a game, if that, or he's going to be on IR before week 2. So to me, Sims is not a threat. So, I mean, who else do we have? Oh, yeah, we had Jeremy McNichols, and he's now gone. So there's no competition for carries early on. And I get it, Kyle. You brought up Doug Martin earlier. I get the Doug Martin love, and I get that he's getting the rave reports and what conditioning, how good a shape he's in right now and how he looks out there. But I cannot trust the muscle hamstring. I can't do it because it seems like every time we do trust him, he's had some big years.
Yep.
But he's out the first 3 games. And if Rodgers takes the job and runs away with it and does that good, and we saw, again, we talked to Harmon about this, and he brought it up, how the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were, they started winning games in that second half when they made more of an emphasis on running the ball. And I think they're smart enough to see that and kind of know that their offense is going to flow a lot better if they're running the ball like they did in that second half, late in the season last year. So, again, they have plenty of weapons to make this happen. But I think Rodgers is a sneaky guy that you can get. And I think he's more than just a 3-week rental. But, again, I'm probably in the minority here. What do you say, Kyle?
I don't think it's crazy, just because we've seen times where Doug Martin, kind of just falls flat on his face, and there's other times where he's 1,400 yards and one of the best running backs, but like I think there's a non-zero chance that Doug Martin is just not a thing this year, and I don't think it's that crazy to think Jacquizz Rodgers could finish, approaching top 20-ish running backs by season's end. I guess my biggest question would be, can he stay healthy? And it would have to be a Charles Sims gets a little bit of the passing down work to kind of make Rodgers a guy that gets, 17 to 20 touches instead of 25 or 30 like he was getting over stretches last year. But, I mean, do I think it's crazy? No. Would I predict it? No. But I think it's a good, bold call, and one that come season's end, if that's the case, I think it would make a ton of sense, and that's kind of why I like grabbing him, especially if I'm a Zeke owner, because not only could he fill in for those weeks where Zeke's out, but you could potentially have a guy that you could start with Zeke the rest of the way and feel pretty good about it.
I think you nailed it with the only concern that I do have, which is the durability issue. Him not really ever showing that he could be a lead back and play, a full season. He hasn't done that yet without injury. So that's the only thing that you brought up. Good point. I will say this much, though. Those tires, man, they're like Michelin. They got a lot of tread left on them. And look at that from that perspective. I mean, I'm optimistic that this could be a guy that could – if he can stay healthy and perform at a high level for that in that offense, which I think he can, you could be looking at a guy that could get in the neighborhood of 200 carries or more this year. I know that's maybe a little bold too, but if he does, yeah, I think this is going to be one of those guys we might look back on and say he was a really good value, and he was more than just that 3 week rental. So obviously, a lot of people are going to be on the Doug Martin train. I get it somewhat because we've seen those seasons from him, but I mean, I think we're going to see the first 3 weeks of the season how this is going to play out, and that's going to be telling, from that point on, come week 4, who's going to be the guy. Is Martin going to get his job back or not?
Yeah. So my second bold call. You ready for this one, Ronald? Are you sitting down? I hope you're sitting down.
I'm ready. I'm sitting.
Devontae Parker will be a top 15 wide receiver this season.
Whoa!
Top
Wow.
15. I think we've talked about Jarvis Landry in past seasons, and if Tannehill was still there, I probably don't make this call. But the Jay Cutler thing I think is a real thing. I think Devontae Parker has 80 something catch, 1,000+ yards, approaching double digit seasons in his realm of outcomes. And
Are you saying in PPR and standard or both? Just real quick.
yes, both.
Okay.
So I think
And real quick, what are your projections for him before I?
So right now I have him projected for 83 catches, 1,075 yards, and 7 touchdowns. And that's, I mean, what I'm projecting, I'm trying to be a little more rational. So I have him as my wide receiver 20. But I'm gonna say that he is a top 15 receiver with his upside, and approaches legit fantasy difference maker, fantasy league winner type status.
First off, I want to say he is definitely that. I actually helped a friend last night do a redraft, draft his team. He's basically like giving me the key to his car. He's like, help me, just I want you to draft this team for me. And guess who I got in like to say the ninth or 10th round? Devontae Parker. And I'm like, dude, I said this to him. I said, this guy, if he hits, he's going to hit big, and he's going to pay off as like your fifth receiver that you drafted on this team. He already had Julio. So, I mean, to me, he's that player that I do agree with you. I think more realistic. I think you're probably more in line with the top 20. But in the realm of outcomes, yeah, I could see him in the top 15. He is that big play receiver that I think the Dolphins were lacking. Landry is just, I mean, he's not going to score a lot of touchdowns. He's not going to be that big play guy. And then also, you have to consider that, the whole contract thing with Landry, we don't know how that's going to play out.
Yeah, and he's got the
And then
domestic
B,
violence thing that's
yeah.
kind of lingering too, which is like I took
So
him.
are these?
He
Yeah, go ahead.
I took him last night. He fell to me in like the 7th or 8th round, and like at that point, I jumped all over him. But yeah, that is definitely something. But like Devontae Parker, if you can get him as your wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4, like he was going in the 9th round back in early August. He's going up in the late 5th now. So obviously there's people that are jumping on board, but it still feels like great value at that point.
I think it was the hype train initially with him kind of coming into the league very young and very immature. We see that with a lot of players nowadays. It's nothing we haven't seen before, and I think the fact that he's now got everything straight, he's showing up, and he's not just showing up, he's blowing up practices. So yeah, I mean these are positive reports to make me feel like they're starting to have some confidence that he can be that type receiver that they drafted early. And B, maybe the heir to the throne when maybe they let Landry walk at the end of the season. So in Dynasty, I love him even more. And that's why I hope that you're right, because I do have him in a few Dynasties where I'm depending on him. Probably he's more my wide receiver 2 or 3 in ones where I have more running back depth. So I'm hoping and I'm praying, but I feel like, yeah, this is a guy that can definitely be a league winner for you if you get him, especially if you get him that late in your draft. And I think, like you said, his ADP has been creeping up for a good reason.
Yep, 100%. Hit me with your last one.
My last one is one that, I mean, Kyle, you know that I could not go one show without talking about my guy, my rookie this year, Zay Jones. Yes, I got him last night. I missed out on Corey Davis, but as my pivot, I did take my boy Zay Jones, and I got him in the 2nd round. I think it was 204. I was really thrilled to get him in that league because I needed receivers. I have, Cobb, but the reason I really feel confident saying my prediction for Zay Jones is that he finishes as a top 25 PPR receiver this year. I know it's a little crazy. I
Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo!
want to say top 20, but then I kind of pumped the brakes just a little bit.
Yeah, it's still
I saw some
pretty
turbulence
aggressive.
in the way of an injury to Tyrod Taylor that might kind of derail his, takeoff
Yeah.
from the airport here in Buffalo. But no, I really do feel pretty confident in Zay Jones, and we're hearing reports on Jordan Matthews still not. He's being questionable for week one. This could be maybe one of those injuries that kind of lingers, maybe like a Doxson injury was last year. If Jordan Matthews, A, has to learn the system, B, has to build some chemistry with Tyrod Taylor or Peterman, he hasn't really done that yet. So to me, this is Zay Jones' show. I know it's a smash mouth, running offense, and that's where they're going to make their money. But I just feel like at the end of the day, this is a guy that can make some big plays for them. He can play pretty much anywhere, and that's the thing. They said, well, he's more of a slot guy. Well, no, that he's not. He can play anywhere, and he can play on the outside. He will be playing on the outside, and he's a guy that I think can beat defenders, and he's going to be able to gain some separation, and he's going to be able to make catches. And I don't know if you saw the one play where he almost scored a touchdown in the end zone. I'm not talking about the Senior Bowl one, which was actually a catch where he did get 2 feet down. But I mean, he was ruled out. But this guy, I mean, those are the kind of plays that he can make at the next level, and I think he will make. And I think he's a guy that, again, I think he has more upside than some people are giving him credit for, because we're all kind of looking at the offense that he's in and kind of the landing spot and kind of maybe buying or reading too much into that. So again, I think this is a guy, double-digit round of redraft leagues. I think I want to say I got him in the 12th round in my keeper league this past weekend, and I thought that was a steal to get him that late. But yeah, I mean, he's a guy that, hey, if you miss out on a Parker, you can get him 4 or 5 rounds later, and still have a guy that doesn't have that upside or the ceiling that Parker does, but he might. I mean, he's gonna be force-fed targets. So
Okay. So
I profess my love for him. You tell me.
you're Zay Jones over Jordan Matthews late in drafts.
100%. Yeah, I actually am, and it's just because again, I have more faith in him. One being the big play guy and playing on the outside where Jordan Matthews, and shout out to Tom Corson at Dynasty Zone. He's gone over it 100 times with me because he's in Philly. He's wired in with that organization, and 2 different organizations tried to make Jordan Matthews play him on the outside, and they both failed miserably.
Yeah, he's not
And
an
he's a
outside
good
guy at
receiver.
all.
Exactly. So if Buffalo's trying to use him on the outside and they're trying to, that's the role he's playing, then I think, again, he's going to be, just kind of mediocre and your boomer bust wide receiver 3, who can have some big weeks here and there, but no consistency. So I think that's what Zay Jones will bring you, is he will, soak up a lot of targets, and he's going to have, some big weeks, but I think he'll be a more consistent option in that offense as far as the pass catchers go, outside of Charles Clay. And I think this will be the guy this year that a lot of people are going to regret not drafting and taking a chance on.
Yeah, well, he's definitely be a guy that I could see myself writing about in week 4, week 5, week 6, my waiver wire, because he's coming on and becoming a thing. I'm still drafting Matthews ahead of him, but it will be interesting to see for sure. This is gonna be my last one, Ron. This is
Hit
gonna
me with
be.
it.
Are you ready for? I mean, I gotta
I'm
look at
bracing for impact here. Go ahead.
Andy Dalton. Andy Dalton will be a top 5 fantasy quarterback this season.
Whoa.
He's
Oh, I almost
got
broke my seat
he's
here. I
got a
almost fell back in my seat.
full season of AJ Green. Hopefully Tyler Heifert for 13, 14 games. Obviously he'll miss a couple. John Ross should be back. He's got Joe Mixon. He's got Gio Bernard. Brandon LaFell can be fine. He almost 1,000 yards last year, or a little over. Andy Dalton, I'm expecting a big season. Almost 4,000 yards and around 30 touchdowns.
Let me just make sure I heard you straight, Kyle, because we've had some audio issues tonight. You said Andy Dalton, top 5 quarterback. Did I hear you right?
You heard me right.
Whew, man. That's a bold prediction. Probably the boldest all night. I love the weapons, don't get me wrong. And I feel like his realm of outcomes, yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of a stretch in my opinion. But I mean, I also think that if AJ Green's out there and he's healthy, and Joe Mixon's a major plays a major role in this offense, and Eifert's out there for maybe let's say 10 to 12 games this year. Yeah, I mean the touchdowns I think will be there. I think this offense is they're gonna move the football down the field effortlessly, and I feel like Andy Dalton is gonna have his best year yet if all those things fall in line for him with these players and they stay healthy, and with the additions that they made with Ross. And yeah, I mean they have playmakers on this team. The other guy, um, Tyler Boyd, everybody just no one talks about him, but this is another guy too that can make some big plays. So I think he's probably one of those quarterbacks that if you're waiting on quarterbacks and you get him really late as your QB1, he could definitely be that guy that could maybe be this year's Matt Ryan. I don't know if I'm going to go that far, but it sounds like you are going that far, Kyle.
Yep. Yeah, I think there's a good chance. Like Andy Dalton 2013 was a top 5 option, so he's done it before. He's a guy that's going super late. You can grab him with one of your last picks, and I think you'll be really happy come season's end that he's your fantasy quarterback.
I definitely think he top tens. I mean, I think more like 8 or 9 for me would be kind of where I think he.
That's kind of my safe projection for him.
Yeah, but yeah, you want to be bold. We want to be bold tonight. I think we
Bold.
both
Let's kick it up
accomplished
a
that.
notch. So. All right, Ron, this was a lot of fun. Make sure if you are watching on YouTube that you are subscribing to our YouTube feed, that you are leaving questions in the comments. Leave us your bold calls. We'd love to see what you guys think. The predictions you guys have. It's definitely, it'd be very cool to see. At FPAOP on Twitter, make sure you follow the show. Always send us questions. Start, sit, add, drop, trades, whatever. Let us know. We're always here to help. If you listen to the pod on iTunes, make sure you are subscribed. Make sure you are rating and reviewing the show. Give us 5 stars. It really does a lot for us. We're still looking for ratings and reviews. So if you are rating and reviewing the show, we'll give you we're going to pick 2 winners. We're going to give you a year of Fake Pigskin Elite, $30 value for free. So make sure you do that. If you haven't signed up for Play Draft, go to playdraft.com/fakepigskin. All that good stuff. Oh, bold call from one of our viewers. Kendall Wright leads the Bears in targets and receptions. I don't think that's that bold. I
Oh,
think that makes a ton of sense. They want Kevin White to be a thing, but he's always hurt. I could see Kendall Wright being, that's another guy that if you have a lot of question marks in your receiving core, if you have, if you're looking for some stability, I think that's a good name to add, especially in PPR. Like he's back with his OC where he had his best season as a wide receiver, over 1,000 yards. I
he's
think
the most
that's
accomplished receiver they have.
yeah,
Exactly. I
yeah.
was going to say
So
the same thing.
I think that's a really good take, and one that I could definitely see playing out. So let us know in the comments what you guys think. But for Ron the Mad Dog McCleese, I'm Kyle Robert, and we'll talk to you.